everyone. Welcome to the panel. Uh, First, maybe let's just start off with very short intros for each of us. About you, about the organization that you represent. Let's keep it short so that we can spend more time on the questions.
Sure. Hi, I'm Carissa Little. I'm from Stanford University. I oversee global and online education at Stanford. Stanford's been in the non-traditional learner space for 70 years now, and my organization oversees all of the massive open and online course portfolio all the way through to part-time and online degrees. I represent Stanford around the globe with our partnerships with companies like Emeritus and Coursera and 2U and edX.
Thank you. Thanks, Carissa.
Super, thank you. My name is Siddharth Banerjee. I am the CEO of Univo Education. Univo is one of the largest, if not the largest, online degree enabler in India. We are funded by the Amity promoter family and Avenue from the US. And we seek to democratize online higher education.
Thanks, Siddharth.
Hi, I'm Nishant. I'm the co-founder of Newton School. We have online courses where we help people get jobs in software development and in AI fields. And in addition to that, we also have 4-year offline BTech programs where thousands of students study each year, again, to go to software development. So we have a fair context of how offline and online works together.
Great. And for the benefit of everyone, my name is Hari. I'm the co-founder at Great Learning. Great Learning is one of India's largest upskilling and higher education companies. We offer online programs, certificates, degrees globally. So thank you, Carissa, Siddharth, and Nishant. So to get the panel started, let's hello. Yeah. Let's have some opening thoughts on what are the recent trends we are seeing. And this panel is completely focused on India as a market. So what are the recent trends that each of you have observed when it comes to upskilling and higher education online?
I can start, and I'll start by saying that I'm representing a global perspective and a Stanford perspective. So while this panel is focused on India, I think what I can bring to the conversation is maybe where Stanford's been in its interactions around the globe. I think the first thing that I'll say about upskilling and reskilling is that is not a new thing. Part of my founding of the organization that I'm a part of is because engineers in Silicon Valley were getting out of date with technology back in the 50s. I think the thing that has changed that's really dramatic for all of us is that technology is now infused in our lives every day and all the time, and the pace of change within one's job and the skills required because of those technological changes is just much more rapid. So that, I heard a statistic that, skills over the last few years in a job have changed by 75% so that means that you will be required to skill, reskill, and upskill. And I think here in India, you also have this young talent base from rural areas, from all over the place that just presents a new set of unique challenges.
Right, super. So to build on that and kind of provide the Indian perspective, I think the topic, the title itself is a little provocative, but like everything else in India, it's not binary, it's not black or white. Somewhere in the middle is where we will probably find a niche to build a sustainable, profitable business. And for us at Univo, we are very, very bullish on the future of online education in India, specifically degrees. So we speak to a lot of learners and their families on a daily basis. And the insights that we gather, I can distill it down to 3 things. First and foremost, I think there's a huge demand for online courses that can skill, upskill, educate a different variety of personas across India. In general, when you think about online education, you tend to think about, hey, a PG online MBA degree. But our thesis has been that the Indian market is large, diverse, across metro, tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 India. And so therefore, we've built with a focus on both the undergraduate market and the postgraduate market. So I think that's the first thing. There are a variety of personas and use cases in India. And I think the skill of building any profitable business in India is understanding the nuances as opposed to following a trend or a herd. So that's one. The second is our learners, our students, our applicants are constantly looking for courses, and I'm talking about specifically online degrees, where there is an industry component in it. So the value that we add as Univo Education is that we try and become a bridge between academia, the online, the higher education, the institution which is the university, and corporates. So everything that we do in terms, or attempt to do in terms of our degrees, is enrich it with content from the industry. So subject matter experts, credits are designed in a manner that they can get more friendly with industry projects, capstones, etc. And that gives almost like an inspiration to step into working world with that much of more confidence, because your degree is attuned to the needs of the industry. That's the second thing, and we are seeing great value in that. Fun fact, we recently launched an online master's in psychology courses, and you can see that there is this trend towards, for example, the mental health space, where we see teachers pivoting and reskilling themselves, HR professionals wanting to have a psychology degree. And again, that has provided us with a whole lot of insight into what are the other emerging careers in online. The point I'm making is it's beyond just the online MBA. So diversity in terms of product offerings. And then the third thing is that, look, ultimately, this is an ecosystem that we are building. So, and you know, one of the things that we spoke about just before this panel is one entity or one organization like Univo cannot do it alone. I think a lot of university partners, a lot of people in the ecosystem are realizing that they will need to combine forces to solve for the larger objective that we are solving for, which is the GER imperative, to lift it from the 25, 26% to the 50%. Those are three things that we are seeing in the landscape.
So I think Carissa and Siddharth covered a lot of ground, so I'll just give a couple of examples. Upskilling is super important because jobs are changing very rapidly. Just as an example, my father worked at a single company for 35 years. My sister has worked, I think, around 8 years in the industry, and she has worked at 3 companies already. And one of my friends started as a consultant at Bain, then joined a very boutique data science firm, then worked at a product company, Myntra, where he had to understand e-commerce, and right now currently is a product manager at Amazon, right? So it's not just that they are changing role companies, it's also that the roles are drastically changing with every job. So if you don't upskill, I think your, anyone's career opportunities will be very, very limited. So, and upskilling in terms of online and offline, of course, has different flavors, which I think we'll discuss over the course of the conversation.
Right, so I think what we're hearing is changing jobs and improving access, right? People who would otherwise have not thought of doing degrees, especially postgraduate degrees, because of restrictions or constraints, are now flocking towards online, right? So let's kind of double click on that. And this is for Siddharth and Nishant. And my numbers could be a little wrong. I think, Siddharth, you may have better numbers, but I believe the online degree market in India is about 200,000, close to 200 or 150, yeah, 175, 200,000 enrollments per year, right? Growing probably at like 20, 25% year on year. And this is all very new because online degrees itself in India is about 3-4 years, right? So if both of you can actually help us understand, what are the personas of these learners, right? Who are these people who are coming and doing and choosing to do online degrees instead of, let's say, physical degrees? And how do you see this space evolving, let's say, over the next few years?
Super. And Hari, you're absolutely right. This is a sunrise industry in India. Penetration of this category is still sub 5%. And with lots of tailwinds. And again, when we were talking about this panel, we spoke about the very favorable regulatory tailwinds that will continue to drive this sector to growth. The consumer behavior of embracing online as a way to study at their time with flexibility, convenience, and of course, online brings in affordability as well. So the 3 vectors of online higher education, so as to speak. Look, when we look at the personas today, and I think we have the privilege of listening into conversations across UG and PG, the personas are extremely fascinating. The use cases are not limited to traditionally just the working population. So yes, there is a substantial persona, and I'll divide it into 4 buckets. There is a substantial persona that we see of working professionals who are upskilling themselves because careers are, and they can take a career pivot and move companies, move industries. There is the need to upskill with technology shifts happening. So that's working professionals who are looking to upskill themselves, go on to higher paying jobs, promotions, etc. So that's one big bucket. The second bucket is people who are looking for their first break. People who are the first jobbers, if you may. A lot of them coming from, and we would tend to think that this is tier 2, tier 3 India, but actually the data proves otherwise. It's across, and we work across about 12,000 pin codes. It's across India, across metros, tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, first jobbers. People looking to build careers, and therefore, it kind of dictates what kind of services you would offer to them. So it's not only the degree, but also what you build into the degree in terms of confidence building, resume builders, etc., etc. The whole list. The third persona are people who are career pivoters. So I spoke about teachers wanting to do a psychology degree because they want to pivot into, let's say, the space of mental health. Or alternative careers, so sports people, politicians, people who have different career aspirations, but who want to have the solidity of a well-recognized degree. And then the fourth is, and again, some of us in the room will relate to this, entrepreneurs, small entrepreneurs, medium entrepreneurs, large owners of businesses who want to have the solidity of a degree with the vocabulary of what is changing in the world. So, you know, to be conversant with what's the knowledge that is happening, which is shifting their world, and also a sense of community or an alumni that they can kind of tap into. So those are the four very interesting personas that we see amongst others in the Indian, and I'm specifically talking about degrees here.
I'll also add some flavor to Siddharth's answer. So I took my first MOOC, massive open online course, when I was in, I think, first or second year. It was, I still remember, Introduction to Philosophy by University of Edinburgh. So, so a lot of times, I think some personas are driven by curiosity, because that was not an essential part of my curriculum. The latest I had talked, we were just talking about it backstage, was Deep Learning Prompt Engineering course by Andrew Ng. So I just had some free time. It was like easy to pass through. So it was pretty fascinating. So one kind of persona is obviously driven by curiosity. The second persona is driven by adding to their job skills, as Siddharth also mentioned. In some sense, they are open to paying a lot more if they can see direct outcomes out of that, especially college students or people who are switching jobs and want to sort of freshen up on their skills. And the third part is actually people who want to sort of add on to their skills. So a lot of software developers in even our companies want to learn a bit about GenAI, even if their current projects are not about GenAI, right? So they have, again, because they have money in their pocket, they have higher paying propensity. And often if they can get degrees which are accredited by some great university, that also acts as a filter of quality for that. So if somebody is doing a course from Stanford, a recognized professor, so that adds a lot of confidence to them. So I think there are people who are driven by curiosity. There are people who are driven by making sure that their skill sort of matrix is very strong. And then again, there's a combination of both when we talk about things like AI.
All right, so what is obvious is that this is a very deep opportunity when it comes into India market, when it comes to upskilling and online degrees, and it's fairly recent, right? So let's kind of flip that a little bit, and let's look at it from the other perspective, which is that what could be the key concerns here that could affect scale and impact over a period of time, right? And Carissa and Nishant, if you guys could answer this. Key themes we know, one is learners and how they view credibility of these options, and of course on the other side are employers and how they view about the seriousness of this form of education.
Yeah, I mean, I think, especially in this market, which what I know to be is a very entrepreneurial market in general, I think that that concern about quality, how do you define quality, how do you ensure that employers are willing to adopt whatever is developed is really going to be crucial as you attempt to scale. Because I think scale creates a lot of creativity, but we also know there are a lot of failures that come from experimentation and scale. And so those are some of the concerns that I have when I think about this market, is there'll be incredible innovations and there will be a lot of subpar quality where learning outcomes are not looked after, where employability is not looked after, where employers aren't a part of the conversation from the beginning when programs are developed.
So from the perspective of especially the Indian audience, one issue to large adoptability is also lack of standardization. So for example, if someone tomorrow wants to learn Gen AI or even basic stuff like Python, there will be free courses available on YouTube. There are $10 courses available on Udemy. Then there are $100 courses available. And then there are $1,000 and $10,000 courses also available. So it's pretty confusing because all the syllabus is almost same and people claim a lot of stuff. So one is the lack of standardization and what people want out of these courses. Because what it does is, for the cheaper courses, people expect too much out of it. And for the more expensive courses, there are price pressures to reduce the cost of the course. So whenever a company wants to deliver something extra, they still have to compete with everyone else who's paying for who's charging a lot less. So one is the standardization of these courses. The second in India is obviously there's no regulation around the claims that a company can make. So I think US has much stricter regulations in terms of how you can talk about the outcomes of a course. Will you get a placement? Will you get a job or not? India, it's still a little open. So there, again, some kind of confusion gets created in the mind of people. And third is just brand and credibility. So it'll take some time for some brands to get established where people know that, okay, if I go here, I'll get something which is of high quality and high reliability. So those are the things.
Maybe I can add, standardization is a problem in the US as well. In fact, my niece, who lives in Gurgaon, she was looking to make a career change from forensic science, forensics to cyber security, and she sent me a list of a bunch of MOOCs and a bunch of price ranges, and she's like, how about I do this? And I looked into it, and it was not a great quality program, but that's because I know the space, not because it's apparent to learners. So I think that's really important.
Just to maybe just kind of add 2 more points to this. I think anyone who's kind of built in India knows that frugality is pretty much ingrained in the Indian consumer. But I say frugality. It's not necessarily equated as cheap. So you've got to, whatever you are building for, you've got to provide that price-value equation. This is the same India that will buy right from a moped to a Maserati. So you've got to provide value at whichever price point. So how does value come in if you are balancing price-value? And so how are you harnessing technology? How are you kind of building in an ecosystem? So I think that's the first thing, that keep the consumer or the learner right in the heart of what you're solving for and build at a certain price-value equation. So that's the first challenge to be solved. The second is perhaps the ecosystem itself. Education, whether it's offline, traditional, or online, our thesis is that it's a patient business. It is not a business of blind blitz scaling. People who've done it have perhaps seen the consequences of that. This has to be built with care. This has to be built with strong focus on student outcomes. This has to be built with, firstly, self-regulation. This has to be built with a sense of responsibility. So when we talk about challenges, some of the challenges are to be solved within the ecosystem itself. So how do you self-regulate in the absence of, let's say, anybody kind of policing down or breathing down your neck? And then the third part is about partnership. So how do you really create a web of partnerships to enable employers specifically to recognize the value of let's say, online degrees? For our part, I can give a very quick example. Univo recently facilitated a partnership between academia and industry. So our anchor partner, Amity Online University and HCL Technologies, we kind of facilitated where we built courses which had the syllabus coming in from the university and course content as much as it's allowed by the regulator coming in from the industry partner, enriched courses that now is being offered to learners at a pricing. And Indian consumers are willing to pay for quality that can give them the outcomes that they desire, and we've seen a very, very positive response to that. So I think those three considerations, if they are kept in mind, you can build something which is scalable and responsible at the same time.
Great. So I think that was going to be my next question, but Siddharth, you've spoken about this, which is that price-value equation, right? The intent, of course, always is to offer the best quality that's possible so that it can have the intended outcomes for the learners. But in India, price is a big constraint, right? So Carissa and Nishant, from your experience of, Carissa, you've seen this across the world. Nishant, you've seen this across a large demography, right? From, upskilling working professionals to degree learners, right? How does this work in India, right? So if you can tell us a few examples or innovations that have been made, right, that you have witnessed where, where you find that sweet spot of the right price and the right quality.
I mean, I think for India, you have this big opportunity right now with the new regulation around how much content can be brought in from other institutions. It's very expensive to build online programs in general, and so a partnership strategy with established institutions that have decent portfolios or with employers that have content that lends to employability, I think is a really great way to reduce the cost and continue to add value. I think you have to think very carefully about really what outcomes are you looking for? Some disciplines lend themselves better to online than others, and the ones that don't will have to be more expensive. There will be pieces of the curriculum that are just more complicated to do or more expensive to build. And so I think just thinking very carefully about those pieces as you're designing your strategy around content.
Yeah, so I think price also sort of equates with the reliability of outcomes. So if somebody is getting a 10 lakh, 20 lakh job or a, whatever, $50,000, $100,000 job out of a course, so then if the reliability is very high, people still have a propensity to pay a higher amount, right? So, but of course, if you reduce the price, the access drastically increases. From a very founder's operative perspective, right? One thing happens is if you can manage your sales and marketing costs, if you have a very strong brand and distribution, so then you can pass on the sales and marketing cost to the, you absorb that cost and pass a cheaper price to the consumer, which I think Physics Wala is a good example who have done that. They've built a great distribution and they don't have to sort of bake in as much sales and marketing that others often have to, and they can subsidize the courses. I wouldn't take our name, we have done a good job as well, but like anyways. So I think that's one way. If you have a great brand, then it makes it easier for consumer to pay a slightly higher price and for you to also pass on the sales and marketing cost to the consumer as well. And the second thing, I think Vimal also was talking in the last panel, a lot of costs come from employing humans to do a lot of work, which is now very rapidly shifting towards AI. So for example, our mock interviewers usually take 2,000 rupees for every mock interview, whereas the AI token fees that it comes out to be is close to 20 rupees. So it's 2 orders of magnitude reduction in the price. Same will happen on the content side, same will happen on the doubt solving side. Our doubt solvers, our AI doubt solvers solve close to 1 lakh doubts in every single month, right? So I think that will also help us reduce the price of delivery to the user, and it'll expand the market drastically.
All right. The next question is actually around innovations in delivery, right? So we know that one of the key constraints is that good faculty or great faculty are few in number, right? And we are talking about, building something in online which reaches scales much, much larger, right? And faculty or availability of faculty is always a constraint. That's one part to it. The other part is we also know that learning is a highly engaging process, which means especially when you're teaching one to many, right, that learning engagement becomes very important, such that you keep every learner in perspective, in your mind while teaching. So let's talk about what are the innovations that each of you has seen, right, when it comes to solving these two key issues when it comes to delivery at scale. Who would like to start?
Yeah,
Siddharth.
why not? Um, so I think 2, 3 things here. Firstly, when we talk about innovation, innovation can be kind of done in a very simple way by understanding the consumer who you are kind of solving for. So innovation comes in just by recognizing what exactly is the material that the student is looking for. Can you make it simple? Can you make it accessible? Can you make it more engaging through simple technology? Not everything needs to be holograms on headsets or doing a mixture of AR, VR. So in the Indian experience, it is essentially ensuring that you are able to do languages, for example, vernacular. You are able to do relatability, so whether it's captions or subtitles, simple things, which allow you to engage. And then combine that with nudges and notifications. So that's one part of learning. The other part of learning is assessment, a self-assessment. How do you make that? So how do you gamify? So whether it's a pop quiz like you have in a physical university, how do you gamify a version of that online, right? How do you make it engaging through other ways in which gamification can bring about greater amount of engagement? How do you build a classroom community kind of a concept when you are still, let's say, on a Zoom screen or a digital screen? I think those are the things that we are solving for when we work with our university partners. So that's one in terms of innovation on the UI UX. Then you spoke about faculty, and I'd like to just bring in the fact that Carissa mentioned a very important point about having strong relationships with university partners, because our thesis is that nothing really beats the experience of a university partner who's been understanding learners for decades and decades and decades. So whether it's Stanford or for Univo, where our anchor partner is Amity University, which has built a very, very deep ingrained understanding of learners over decades. We bring that to bear in the way that the faculty of this university is able to then relate to students, pick up their doubts, bring in that classroom atmosphere into an otherwise online environment. Again, when we speak about faculty, there is a healthy mix of the faculty of the university and subject matter experts who come in from the industry. Because ultimately, what the learner is looking towards is education, but education which helps in a certain outcome. And I think those are the nuances that we try and solve for.
Yeah, I'd love to add to that. I mean, I think you did a nice job covering the landscape. I would just add that some of the things I'm seeing at Stanford have a lot to do with using generative AI as a means to practice or simulate something that would take hours to do one-on-one with a human, and having that be something that can be done with the concept of a 24/7 tutor, or it could be as a reflection tool, thinking of it as a simulation for practice, like pilots fly airplanes, they sit in simulators and think about that sort of guide on the side as you're learning concepts and having ways to practice in a safe and sane way. So that's one. I think another one that's really interesting is when I think about VR, AR, I think about what are those experiences that you could not otherwise have? And one example in the United States, Stanford has this very special collection of Martin Luther King Jr.'s papers that he wrote while he was in a very small prison cell. So I would think about using a VR experience to show to students what it felt like to be confined in that prison cell for years, and how much little space he had when he was writing these very impactful papers that are extremely famous now. So those types of technologies can be applied in unique ways, and I think in the future the intersection of VR, AR with generative AI and the ability to rapidly produce content and create simulations will be really powerful. We're not there yet. That'll be like 10 years from now, but something I'm thinking about.
That's great. So I'll also expand on Siddharth's point, which we take quite granted for now, but from last 10, 15 years, access to great teachers has become phenomenal. Right now, if somebody wants to enter Google, it's very, very easy to find a teacher through any course who will actually teach you how to get into Google, or access to Stanford or MIT or IIT Bombay professors or IIT Madras professors, right? I mean, 10, 15 years ago, that was like very, very, very hard to get. So one, that magic has happened. The second important thing, obviously, is the advancements in generative AI, right? So so for example, we were working with a government school, bunch of government schools in Telangana, and there what we see is we were sort of giving them Python courses and stuff like that, but they were not very adept with English. So we tried to convert that into Telugu language, but spoken Telugu of even large foundational models is not there yet. The texts are there, it can write it very well, but it cannot speak it very well. So as you know, these language translations and things will kick in, the remotest parts of India will get access to some phenomenal content, right? And obviously YouTube has been a great player in sort of democratizing individual creators to become good teachers, so that gives a lot of flavor. So some people are very excitable, some people are very funny, some people are very serious and composed. So that also gives a lot of variety to the students on wherever they can learn from. So there has been a lot of innovations, but the innovation of innovation is the AI thing that's coming across. We are pretty excited about it.
Fantastic. Thank you. Thanks for all those responses. I think everyone in the audience would have gotten a glimpse of how 3 different organizations are working with 3 different innovations, right? And how fast the things are changing. We have time for just one last question. And this is about the larger vision that the Indian government has set out, which is the gross enrollment ratio. So right now, we are at about 27, 28% GER. And the target by 2035 is to be at 50%, right? So that's a massive jump, right? I'd like to hear from each of you, for such a big unlock to happen, what are the 1 or 2 imperative things that need to happen in this space?
I mean, let me go first because I kind of started out in my opening statement saying that at Univo Education, our mission, what we are guided by on a daily basis is to help democratize online higher education, and that fits in very, very strongly with the GER imperative. So I think 2 things. One is for us to scale or to build an organization in a responsible manner, providing solutions to the student, keeping the student or the learner at the heart of everything that we do. I think if we can do that, and if everybody in the ecosystem can do that, that will help greatly towards the achievement or going towards the 50% GER goal. As one of the few online higher education companies which has both scale and profitability, at Univo, I think we have the privilege of counseling, listening into thousands of students every day. And all that we hear from them is give us quality. So I think ruthless and single-minded devotion to quality. So that's point number 1. Because then that has many network effects. Employers will trust the graduates that come out. There will be positive word of mouth. Referrals will increase. All the happy effects that happen if you focus straight into quality on a daily basis. So that's one. The second thing, and which is more like a call out to the larger ecosystem, is that our thesis is that nobody, towards the GER goal, nobody can do it by themselves. Not one organization, not one university, etc. Oftentimes in India, you would hear the phrase that hum khud hi kar lenge. It doesn't happen like that. And especially in a country like as large, as diverse as in India, I think the invitation to the ecosystem is to make sure that you partner with the right people in the ecosystem so that you are solving for something which is long-term and valuable like education.
Great. Thanks. Carissa, would you like to go next?
Yeah, I mean, I think you covered a lot of ground, so I'm not sure I have a lot to add. The one thing that I will say, though, is I know India's made a lot of progress on the gender gap in general, but as I understand it, there's still quite a big gender gap, so I think focusing on that as an imperative as you're designing programs, as you're marketing programs, is really crucial. The other thing I would say is to think a little bit about what's the sustainability model and keeping the costs down, and who is paying for what. So you have employers, you have individual learners, you have government, you have universities, and as you're thinking about the whole system, you want to be thinking about at what point is someone getting value and are they willing to pay for it. So I think those different markets are important.
Shant.
Yeah, so to add to those, to increase the enrollment ratios, one, we as a country need many more educational institutions. We cannot just, we are a country of 1.5 billion people, right? We cannot just run on 5 or 10 good institutions, right? So people like Newton School of Technology, who are great private players who provide really high quality education have to come into the space, and there have to be hundreds of such institutions who can absorb the quantity that's coming out from underneath, right? So that is one. The second important thing, of course, is the partnership piece that, Siddharth was talking about. I think ISB also started with partnering with, I think, Harvard and Kellogg or something like that, right? So it's very, very important for people who have done it for decades to partner with the new folks, like the older IITs did with newer IITs, to transfer that knowledge so that the newer institutions also do a good job at it. And obviously, a lot of this burden also relies on the one obvious thing is obviously online education and increasing more accessibility, so people who are, let's say, don't have that much mobility can do it well. But another big burden is on the primary and secondary education sectors as well, because India sees a lot of drop-off at the primary stage. 30–40% of people in a lot of pockets just drop out of primary and secondary education. So if you're starting with a class of 100 there, you're left with a class of 60 or 55. So that itself, hits the gross enrollment ratio a lot. So I think those are the 2–3 things that we have to fix. It's a long journey ahead of us, but there are a lot of us, so we'll solve it. I think I'm super optimistic about that.
So I think what's clear is that this challenge is not going to get met by building more physical universities, which will happen organically. But it is about focus on quality, improving access through technology, through innovation, such that quality meets the price, and that's where more and more people will learn. Thank you, panel. Thank you for your time, for your thoughts. Wonderful to hear all of you. Thank you once again. Thank you, all of you.
Thank you. Thank you.